Hi, I'm Kaytlyn,
And I'm Brianna.
and welcome to the Readers Clubhouse, where we revisit our childhood favorite content. Brianna, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Better than I was.
Better than you was?
Yeah.
We've both been sick recently. Are you
Yeah.
recovered from that? Mostly?
For the most part, still have a little bit of a stuffy nose, a cough that hasn't fully gone away, and hopefully will at some point, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But, like, I literally got sick twice in a row. Like, I had, at the beginning of January, I had food poisoning, and then, like, a week and a half later, got sick. Was sick for, like, 2 weeks. Had, like, a very brief week of recovery, and at the end of that week, was sick again.
Yeah.
And then now I'm at the tail end of getting better finally again from that one. So it was like being slammed to the ground over and over again with sickness and
Like
stuff.
Hulk,
It's
like
like
Hulk
Hulk
and Loki.
and Loki, yeah. That literally felt like Loki at the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
What about you, Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really tired. I think I was also sick in January, but I was only sick one time. Or no, February. I don't remember. Um, no, it was January because I went on a retreat sort of middle end of January, and
Mm.
then the next week had planned on starting to work out again. And then that Monday, it was like a Thursday night that I was like, I feel something interesting. And
Yeah.
then Friday just sort of decline, Saturday even worse decline, Sunday
Hmm.
even worse decline. And then it sort of was, I was low for 2 days and then I started to come out of it.
Yeah.
I, I think it was probably like well, I don't think it was the flu or COVID necessarily the way I've had them before, because I've had both of
Mm.
those before and it was unpleasant. But this time it wasn't as bad as the sickness I had in November of last year,
Ooh,
which
yeah.
I live with friends with kids, and it's the thing about like kids is they're germ factories, right? We always say this if you work with kids. And
Yep.
their oldest goes to school now, their youngest is not old enough to go to school yet. But just they're full of germs, and if one of them gets sick, the other gets sick very quickly. And then of
Oh,
course the
absolutely.
parents get sick, and then of course Kaytlyn gets sick from after that. Even though the more sickness there is in the house, they're like, Kaytlyn, the more sickness there is, the less we see you in the house. And I'm like, that is correct.
That sounds right.
I'm trying to quarantine myself so I don't fall ill.
Yep.
Um, Relevant because this book has a plague in it, Brianna.
It does.
And
It's not
almost
the only time we'll see plague in this series,
no.
but
And also, oh no, this is about the next book we're gonna read. Never mind, I'll come back to this comment later. Yeah, so why don't you tell us what we've read and give us some stats?
all right. We are back in Redwall again with the book Salamandastron. Very long word. Some of you may recognize it in other episodes that we've mentioned it before. It's the mountain along the shore of Mossflower Woods. It's always ruled by a badger lord or lady and has a bunch of hares in it, and they all fight against evil basically and stuff. So that is a huge part of what the story's about. A couple of stats for the book itself. It was written in 1994. And then obviously Brian Jakes, our longtime friend here, was the one that wrote it. It's a fantasy fiction book, and it's generally marketed as a middle grade, but also honestly, I could feel like it could go over young adult also with some of the subject material.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
very interesting stuff with that. Something I want to point out to everybody, if you're paying attention to the timeline in any way, shape, or form, this book is set probably a generation or two, depending on weird anthropomorphic animal age time that we don't quite understand. You'll actually hear a little bit more about that in our next episode. It is literally like the next, like great example for this. If any of you remember from the Bellmaker and Mariel, Saxtus, he was the one that became abbot after, is it Bernard?
Bernard.
Bernard died in the first book, or no, did he die in the first book
He
or
died in
retire?
between the books.
That's what it was. Okay. So
Yes.
Saxtus, it went Bernard, Saxtus, and then Vale? No.
I don't think she was immediately after Saxtus. I think
She
it
said it said that she took over.
did it say that she took over from Saxtus?
Yeah. I remember
Girl,
it saying at one point Saxtus, like she'd known Saxtus, she'd taken over right after him.
you keep talking. I'm gonna Google.
Okay.
And by Google, I mean
So,
open my book and read.
I
Oh
see.
yeah, no, successor to old Abbot Saxtus.
He was old Abbot Saxtus when that happened. And if we remember
Wow.
correctly, he was like a young adult at like in Bellmaker
Yeah.
and stuff. But I have to point out to people, chronologically, this was written before Bellmaker. So it's
Oh my
very
gosh.
interesting. Yeah.
Wait.
So we didn't like at this point we didn't fully know that Saxus was abbot when this, so like let's say it's 1994 again. You were waiting for after Mariel came out and stuff. I don't even remember. There might have been like other books in between. But you're like, oh, Saxus was abbot. And then literally a short time later, we get another story. It's like, oh, we get a story from that part of the timeline, and all that kind of stuff. So some of the things, like there's stuff that happened in Bellmaker that like there was no context for in Salamandastron when it was originally written and stuff. Very interesting timeline fact with all of that and stuff.
Brianna,
Caitlin.
Salamandastron. So it was Mariel, then Salamandastron.
Mm.
Published
Yeah.
order. Um, and also the wiki is saying that Salamandastron was published in 93.
Oh.
I don't know. Then came Martin the Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Then came Bellmaker.
Yeah. I had a feeling there was one between Billmaker and Salamandastron.
That is crazy to me. But okay, also for a hot second, I thought Salamandastron was written before Mariel also. And so I was like, wait a minute, does that mean we get to see like if you read Mariel, if no. So that's not what happened. So actually my random thought was wrong. So that's okay. But it's funny to me that you if you were reading it as he was publishing them,
Yeah.
then you read Mariel, you learn, oh, Saxus becomes abbot, and then you read Salamandastron, and you're like, oh, well, this is now, you know, probably what another 40 years post Mariel, and then you go back to Bellmaker, which you stick in the middle of Mariel and Salamandastron. That's just really interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to take
Does,
over.
yeah.
You go.
That's just an
Interesting thing to point out with like how the story came together, not just like what we read on that page, but how it was written. It's very interesting and kind of leads towards our understanding about where Jake's was at that point in his life, etc., kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I am going to read the summary. It's a little bit long, guys. I'm sorry. Um, we'll see how this all goes and stuff. Uh, Still finding a rhythm with this and everything for myself. All right, are we ready?
I am that hero. Yes, I'm ready.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Some seasons after the adventures of Mario, we find ourselves following the story of Mara, a young badger girl who was raised as the adoptive daughter of Lord Earthstripe, the Badger Lord of Salamandastron. Her adoptive father has hopes for her to become the future badger ruler of the mountain, but Mara wants nothing to do with this. After her and her hare friend Pickles stumble upon a young blue-eyed ferret and his companion, and a further falling out of her relationship with her father, they run off and are almost captured by a Farago, the assassin. His son is a young ferret that had pretended to be their friend and led them there, but with the timely help of a hare named Sergeant Sapwood, who is sent to watch them, they are able to escape. Meanwhile, in Redwall Abbey, it is time to celebrate the naming of the season. We are introduced to Samkin and Arula, a young squirrel, and Mole, who are a bit of mischief makers at the Abbey. After being punished for using arrows in the Abbey, where they almost had a few close calls, they are punished, though not for very long. Soon, a pair of stoats come to the Abbey and are allowed to join the feasting. As night comes during the feast day, a large storm sweeps over the woods, and as Samkin runs to bring things in, lightning strikes the weather vane, and the sword drops from the sky. The Abbey dwellers are sure it is Martin's sword, but want to be sure, and their recorder, Brother Hal, goes to do some research. During the night, the two Stoat guests start to play with the game equipment, namely the bow and arrows. Unfortunately, due to their carelessness, they kill Brother Hal, who had been running to tell everyone that the sword was in fact Martin's. The Stoats flee and take the newly found sword with them. The next morning, poor Samkin was the one who finds the dead brother, and for a brief moment the worst is thought of him since he is found holding the bow. Back with Mara and Pickle, they find themselves soon captured by toads, but then rescued by the Gaussum shrews who had come to rescue those of their own, also captured by the toads. The leader, Logalog, asks Mara for a favor in finding a lost stone that proved his leadership on an island that is supposedly haunted by a ghost white badger. She agrees, and they set off. As the Abbey investigates and finds that it was the Stoats that caused the death of Brother Hal, they realize that Samkin and Arula have left to get Martin's sword back. The duo meet an old vole who found one of the Stoats, dead from sickness. The vole runs back to Redwall to warn them, but it is too late. Some have begun to fall to the sickness, dry ditch fever. The only cure is a flower in the northern mountains. A brave Abbey otter named Thrug sets off with a small companion to find the cure, and they eventually do with the help of some northern eagles and hawks. Mara and Pickle go with the Gaussum to the island, and it is soon found that the ghost is really just a completely white badger, Earthwhite, who lives on the island with his grandmother and an old squirrel. They realize quickly that the ferret Farago is the one who killed Earthwhite's parents, and that Earthstripe is his long-lost brother. They resolve to head back to the mountain to help him and reunite. Meanwhile, Samkin and Arula, with the help of an old hedgehog and other Gaussum, chase after the last Stoat, and then a fox that gained the sword, and are able to get back Martin's sword briefly before it is lost again to a lake monster. But as luck would have it, Mara finds the sword, and the two parties come together. They resolve to all go help Salamandastron. In the final conflict, the mountain finds their supplies running out due to poison and low morale due to casualties. Lord Earthstripe loses himself to the battle rage and takes on Farago, but finds himself injured gravely, and the mountain overrun with vermin. The Redwall and Gaussum reinforcements come at the right time and turn the tides, but not before Lord Earthstripe, in one final push of strength, takes Farago and throws both of themselves off the mountain, killing them both. After much mourning and cleaning up, Mara resolves to leave the mountain and go to Redwall with Samkin and Arula. They come home to a healthy Abbey, and all is well in the woods again.
Nice.
Thanks.
Man. This was
Again, so much detail was left out.
literally so many things. This is one of the things sometimes I'm actually experiencing this because I'm currently reading the next book we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it to be a lot slower and a lot less interesting, if I'm being fully honest.
Engaging, yeah.
This one, though, I felt like the pacing was really good in this one. That it just really, like, I don't know, there'd be a few moments, like a few pages of downtime, and then just every instance really drove the plot forward. And, because there was sort of three major journeys that were happening, and you followed each of the sort of main pairs off in their journeys, and then one of the storylines, the Abbey storyline, resolves itself before the Salamandastron storyline resolves itself. But you have the two, sort of the Mara and the Samkin, like, storylines converging and then off to the mountain. And as I'm listening to this, there's points that I'm like, I don't actually want to pause it because I already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I've read this. This is, one I've read a few more times, so I remembered it a bit more. But I just thought it was really, the pacing on it was really good. The story in this one was really good, really strong. And I don't know. I enjoyed re-listening to this, and sort of re-listening to this. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess our classic Brian Jake's next section, talking about
Yeah.
the songs and poems.
Oh yeah.
Um, this, Brian, we talk about it every time. Brian Jakes writes a poem, and there's always a ditty.
Mm-hmm.
You go every couple chapters, there's a new little ditty or song or something like that that's being sung.
Yeah.
So
Or a riddle
or
or
riddle or something like that. So I think one of the big things for me in this book was, I guess I'll start with the hymn. So this is something that, or maybe I'll wait. I'll come back to the hymn because actually I think that will tie into a bit of the world building slash story um for us. But one of the big things is Martin is a spiritual leader, guide, creature for the
yeah.
creatures of the Abbey, and he often comes back and reassures, or he'll set the main character from the Abbey on its mission to, destiny or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then in this one particularly, the he reassures the Abbey creatures, or at least those who are still conscious,
Yeah.
throughout the plague, that Sam Kim and Arula are okay, and
Mm.
specifically through Sister Nasturtium's poems and song. Also, on
Yeah.
a slightly different note, I don't know, I never listened to the audiobooks when I was a kid,
Mm.
okay? And I don't remember how I pronounced her name when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was something like Nasturtium because that's how it was written, and I just
Looks on the
pronounced,
page, yeah.
yeah. But when he was saying nasturtium in my brain, I'm like, what? How do you spell that? So when because I had the physical copy, I opened the physical copy because I did sort of like some reading with my eyes and some listening with my ears
Mm. Yeah.
through this book. And I was like, that is how you spell that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Nasturtium. Nasturtium.
Yeah.
Absolutely bananas. But also, that sounds so much like a nun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna tell me that like well, I guess Rue is technically not a sister. I don't know, like Hal. Hal doesn't really sound like a brother
Yeah.
name, for a monk in the woods. But Nasturtium 100% sounds like some
Yeah.
nun that lives in the woods. Anyway.
Well, like earlier on, like when we go all the way back to Redwall, there's like Mortimer and Methuselah,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's definitely a lot more like religious sounding names.
Yeah.
Some of them are also like plant-based, which
Mm-hmm.
depending on the plant also sounds slightly religious at times.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
Because you
You're
also
like,
have
oh yeah,
like Hollyberry, brother Hollyberry in this
yeah,
one, right?
yeah,
Then you have Bremen.
yeah,
Anyway, so that was just interesting. Anyway, Martin. He
yeah.
is the mouse that speaks to the people. Um,
Speaks to the trees.
he speaks for the trees. Mossflower trees specifically.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, so that was an interesting thing about the poems, is just that she specifically gets, I hesitate to say possessed because it's not quite the same, but there is this moment where she like her eyes sort of glaze over and she starts speaking in this poem of something, and everybody's looking at her like, huh? And she's like, I don't know what just came over me. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, Also the fact that her voice actress, or like the woman narrating her lines, is the woman that
Mm.
usually narrates the female badgers in
Yeah.
this series, really threw me off. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, what
Yeah.
is happening? But then of course she ends up narrating for Lomebud,
Yes.
Earthstripe, and Earthwhite's grandmother. And
Yeah.
so I was just like, okay, there she is. There she is. She's back. She's doing the part that I strongly identify her voice in.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder if, because I listened to Redwall first, not
Mm.
even before we started the podcast, back when I sort of started rereading the Redwall series, I was listening to them anyway. And
Mm.
I think because I listened to Redwall first, all the voice actors from that cemented in my brain as
Yeah.
this is the type of character this person is playing.
Yeah.
So anyway, on page 42 of my copy
Mm.
of
Yeah.
Salamandastron, there's also a hymn, and this is going to kind of tie us into world building slash story because the hymn is, I'm just going to read it for you, okay?
Yeah.
I'm not going to sing it. They sing it in the audiobook,
Yeah. They do a
but
great job.
they do a great job. I'm because this is the thing is Nasturtium had a melodious voice, and that was why they asked her to sing.
Mm.
She's a plump mouse, very pretty and jolly, and had always been popular with the young ones, is how she's described in this.
So she
She's
was
this
mom shaped.
she was the school marm that everybody was
Hmm.
like had heart eyes for because
Yeah.
she was pretty and young and could sing very beautifully.
Mm.
Um, which is very funny to me. In days of old, a warrior bold, all paw-sore, tired, and lame, came marching through the winter's cold, and Martin was his name. Martin, Martin, the warrior of Redwall, with courage and his trusty sword, he came to save us all. Now, in those high and far off days, the country was oppressed by vermin cruel, whose tyrant ways would let no creature rest. But truth and bravery won the day, for all through Mossflower wide, good, honest creatures made their way to stand by Martin's side. And they cried, Martin, Martin, the warrior of Redwall, with courage and his trusty sword, he came to save us all. The evil ones he put to flight, and justice he restored. His heart was strong, his cause was right, and mighty was his sword. He helped to build our abbey here, the land rings with his fame. Now peace lives here, we know no fear, for Martin was his name. Martin, Martin, the warrior of Redwall, with courage and his trusty sword, he came to save us all. Now
Mm.
I listened to this and I'm like, that is literally a hymn.
Mm.
And I know that because at my church, sometimes we sing hymns, and structurally speaking, this song is a really good hymn.
Mm.
Like, structurally fantastic in
Yeah.
terms of it's got a verse and a chorus, a verse and a chorus. It's really short, it's really snappy, it's descriptive, it's theologically sound, one might say, in terms of like
Yeah.
the spirituality of Martin the Warrior. And I was like, hold on a minute. If this is because it says every creature joined in the last rousing chorus and set up a loud cheer. Um, let's see. I'm trying to. Okay, so it doesn't say, "Oh, sing this particular hymn." It just says, "Sing
Yeah.
something," and she chooses to sing about Martin the Warrior because the two stoats that are at the Abbey are like, "Who's Martin the Warrior?" And this is
Yeah.
another thing that really got me is no, hold on, finish your thought. So I just find it interesting that there's a hymn written, and obviously Martin is well known through the Abbey and through the ages of the Abbey. Everybody knows Martin the Warrior. Everyone knows that he's
Yeah.
defending the Abbey spiritually in some, and
Mm.
sometimes like physically in some ways. Um, but if you write a hymn, why is the hymn not followed through on in future books? Like,
Yeah.
why is this? It talks about the records of the Abbey being really detailed and
Yeah.
how they've got this long history of the tales of Redwall being written down and the different records of the abbots and abbesses and the warriors and all these
Mm.
records really well written down. I imagine they were writing down songs as well
Yeah.
because it's a part of the Abbey lore, I guess. But this hymn, we never see it again.
Nope.
Literally all like
We talked about this a little bit before the podcast and stuff, and like it's the same thing with like other reference songs of like the Gaussum have sung this song for
mm-hmm.
generations or whatever. And we're like, why have the Gaussum are almost in most of the books, and like why did we not hear them ever sing this like I don't know rowing song ever before this time and stuff?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I feel like it kind of goes with our what is it that we keep saying? Discrepancy.
Oh, discrepancies, yeah.
Yeah, like that is one of the, and I'm like, I'm sure a lot of authors do this. We can't probably fully blame Brian Jakes for like choosing it to do this way and stuff. But that whole like, why did we not reuse some of these songs? It would have made sense. That would have been interesting connection between the past and the present in a lot of ways and stuff. And
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense. Like, I don't know if this is entirely true, but I feel like Brian wrote a lot of the prequel stuff before he moved on to the after Redwall stuff. So I'm like, I will, and again, I could be wrong with some of it, but it just feels like that with some of the reading that I've done
Yeah, I
on
mean,
timeline stuff.
if we're
But
looking at the timeline,
yeah,
I mean, Matameo is the direct sequel to Redwall.
yeah, those
But
two.
if you put those together, because those are direct sequel,
Yeah.
um, yeah, you've got Mossflower, Marielle, Salamandastron, Martin the Warrior, Bellmaker, Outcast. So that's, I think,
Hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is 6 books that are prequels to Redwall in
Yeah.
the first 8 books. And
Yeah.
then the ninth book that came out was the first, like, after Matameo
Yeah.
thing. Because if I remember correctly, Brianna, technically Pearls of Lutra is a direct sequel to Matameo
Yes.
because Matameo's son,
Son, Martin.
Martin too,
Yeah.
is the warrior in
Yeah.
that book, which I just
Yes.
remembered in this exact moment.
You didn't remember Martin too?
No, because he was not as memorable.
He really wasn't. Again, it's been a while,
Yeah.
so maybe we'll be a little more forgiving to him later,
Yeah,
but
we'll get to that.
get to that, yeah.
Uh,
But like going back to what I was saying, kind
yeah,
of a thing, like when we start getting to some later ones, there are connections are made, but not really the songs. I can't
no.
remember it ever being like, yeah, this song is in multiple parts. No, like there's
Mm-mm.
places referenced, like the lake in this book is
Yes.
referenced, and we'll see later in Marlfox,
Yep.
if that's what it is. Yeah, and
Yep.
again, won't go into detail about that because it's gonna be a while before we get there. But it's like, yeah, we get places referenced, but sometimes like lore of like or certain world building parts that aren't like the places aren't referenced again
Yeah.
and everything. Which I was like, you had so much potential to be like, yeah, this song that the Gaussimo sung for generations, we see this multiple times. We're like, oh yeah, we know
Yeah.
this song and everything. So
Yeah.
it's
It is really interesting. And sorry, I'm just bringing up the map because we're gonna go into world building a bit.
mm,
Oh, I can make it full screen. Nice. That's cool. Speaking of places, speaking of world building, there's some new things here in this Salamandastron that they introduced, but there's also some repeat things. So the first sort of major landscape is the lake. So the big thing about the lake is that Brando just said we revisit it in the future books, but it's a big inland lake and there's an island in the lake. And
mm.
oh, we were talking about this because of rowing, because I texted you and I was like, I didn't realize
Oh, how big it
basically
was.
how big it was when the stream comes in and land and sort of the characters land in the lake. They have they say it's going to take them 2 days to
Mm.
row to the
Yeah.
island, which is crazy to me because I was like, hold on a minute. How long would it take to row across like in the Great Lakes in like Michigan, like Lake
Mm.
Michigan specifically? I
Yeah.
think it what did I text you? That it was please hold while I scroll. Going across Lake Michigan would take about 26 hours, and that's 65 miles. So if we're okay, I'm also trying to I was trying to do some mental math with this, okay? So a
Mm.
human, the average human adult, it would take 26 hours to go 65 miles,
Mm.
okay? So let's say that's what is that? 130 around 130 miles would take just over 2 days,
Yeah.
okay? So theoretically speaking,
Hmm.
if we're saying everybody's human size, okay, then
Yeah.
from the entrance of the stream into the lake
Hmm.
to the island is like 130 miles.
Yeah.
Insanity.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this, I think, when I responded to you, like both Mara's group and then Samkin's group both end up on the lake. And all the stuff that happens, like Samkin's, obviously there was a storm going on
Yeah.
during this, was part of it when Samkin's group got onto the lake and stuff, and they had to deal with a sea monster, or well, a lake monster.
Hmm.
And but like they even after like all of that, like uh the the Gaussum on the island didn't see the other group of Gaussum until like they heard somebody, I think, calling or something like that.
Samkin.
And so, yeah. So like it's so big that you are could be on the same lake and not even see the other person and
Yeah.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
I think this was another thing that I had to remember is that they're animals.
Yeah.
And so where I as I was trying to do the mental math of this, I had to remember, okay, they're not the same size. I don't think these are like 6 foot tall badgers and six,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like they're not five
Yeah.
and a half feet tall mice. I like to think that they're sort of like child sized
Okay.
in theory. Like the mice are fully developed, like Reepicheep in Narnia, how
Okay.
he was a fully developed animal,
Yeah.
but was just yay big, 2 feet tall or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of how I've always pictured them, as they're like this isn't human sized necessarily, although there's lots of questions about like Saint Ninians.
Mm.
We know Redwall was built by Martin and the woodland creatures, so that is woodland creature sized. But the
Yeah.
church, Saint Ninian's church, I have questions about that.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a big one, obviously, and that's not just because it's a big lake.
Yeah.
The other sort of thing is common in a lot of the books that do travel journeys is swamps and
Yeah.
toadlands. Specifically, the ones south of Salamandastron is
Mm.
anytime they're traveling south, because in Mariel, they traveled south to
Yeah.
Floret, which was south, and they went through the swamps, they went through the toadlands. So Mara and Pickle also do the same thing. They go through the toads, they go through the swamplands. Um, so that's a recurring feature. You also
Yeah.
have the mountains north of Redwall, and specifically, okay, but there's actually two things. One is the crows, because if I remember correctly, through Madame Mayo, when they're going through to get to,
The underground kingdom or whatever.
yeah, where was that?
It's near Loamhedge.
Yeah,
If
Lomehedge
Loamhedge is
isn't
on the
actually,
map.
Lomehedge is not on the map. Lomehedge is not on the map.
That's weird.
I agree. I wonder if Lomehedge is even further north past.
I don't remember them having to go through mountains though.
But this is the thing, is the mountains don't cut across the entire continent.
Oh, okay.
They're just sort of like individual mountains. Um, but I mean there was the whole, I guess, Great Drop. What do you call it? Like a cliffside. Anyway, they go to the crows, and I remember in Matameo they also pass through some crows
Yeah.
trees, and I think it's the same trees. That's all I was trying to say. I think it's the same.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course there's the big North Mountains, which are there and
Yeah.
are I I'm actually kind of disappointed because I want more Scottish birds in Redwall, and we don't get enough of them, I think.
I can't at the moment remember there being any other ones.
No. I know there's definitely Scottish like characters because
Yes.
Rackety Tam, right? Squirrels.
We even, I don't remember if it was in this one or was it, it was it was Outcast, which is our next episode.
Mhm.
There's a Scottish fox.
Oh, interesting. Sometimes
Yeah.
the characters like in Redwall will have a Scottish or Irish accent, and I'm like, obviously Brian Jake's the one producing these audiobooks, so he's the one that's like, this one's gonna be Scottish, this one's gonna be Irish. But I just never thought. I mean, granted, I'm American, and so I read in an American accent.
Specifically, when any almost any character is like from the north is what they're
Mhm.
referenced, they will have a Scottish accent
Yeah.
and it's noticeable on the page. Any of the other accents that we get usually are a little bit kind of like up in the air with some stuff
Hmm.
uh until you hear it on audio.
Yeah.
Or it's like the mole speech, which is his own dialect and
Yeah.
everything, but that's not like a an accent really, it's just
No.
a dialect.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Shall we get into characters? Now, I have
yeah.
one thing I want to say before we talk about our favorite characters. There was a lot of parent-child relationships in
Hmm.
this book as I was listening to it that I noticed, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. The first one, obviously, is the actual parent-child, Farago and Klitsch. Now, this is the
Yeah.
thing we've noticed in the Vermin that how are there even vermin? Because
Yeah.
the mates hate each other,
Yeah.
apparently. There's no love there. They're incapable of love, I guess. And then also the parents and the children hate each other.
Hmm.
And that is again, how do they procreate when
Yeah.
everybody just hates each other? Like
That's
literally,
actually a question we can discuss more in the next book because
I
it
agree. Yeah.
definitely like is more emphasized in that one.
Yes. And it was just one of those things that I'm like, I don't understand how there ever is even more vermin because everybody hates each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just confuses me.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one parent-child relationship. You also had the Earthstripe and Mara parent-child because Earthstripe adopts Mara. Mara's not his
Yeah.
actual daughter. He finds her and takes her in when she's a babe and
Yeah.
raises her. And there's classic like Ariel and King Trident relationship here a bit,
Yeah.
where King Trident's like, this is the way things are, things won't change. And then Mara, or Ariel's just like, but Daddy, I love him. And then wants to go where the people are. Mara,
Yeah.
not so much the daddy, I love him part, but the like, why are you a curmudgeonly old badger man? I want
Yeah.
to be free from this. And then, of course, she becomes friends with Glitch, and who is a manipulative liar, and she lets him in to the not to the abbey, to the mountain,
Yeah.
who and then discovers Glitch is a manipulative liar and betrays her and is trying to use her as a bargaining chip essentially to get Badger treasure.
Yeah.
So anyway, parent child, Earthstripe Mara. And the fact that Earthstripe just loves Mara so deeply, but he's not really fatherly. He just
No.
doesn't have it in
He doesn't
him.
know to express his emotions healthily.
No, no, he does not. And then my favorite, it's not necessarily parent child, but it's sort of more like uncle nephew, but it's still
Oh
sort of
yeah.
an older is Thrug and Dumble,
I
who
knew
both
it, yeah.
flee the Abbey because they neither of them wants to get sick.
That's
And
not the reason why they flee.
it is the reason why they flee the Abbey.
The- They don't flee the Abbey, they go find a cure.
Okay, okay. Yes, you're right. They go to find a cure, but the reason they're like, "Oh, yes, I volunteer as tribute" is because Thrug doesn't want to get sick. Because someone else says, "Oh, I'll go," and then Thrug's like, "Nope, it's me. I'm gonna go." And then Dumble sneaks into the haversack because
Hmm.
Dumble's like, "I also don't want to go get sick." Granted,
Mm.
Dumble's like 3, and
Yeah.
Thrug is a grown otter, and so it was just you're right. They went to go get the cure for the sickness. That is technically the reason. The reason they particularly went was because neither of them wanted to get sick.
Okay.
Thrug was afraid of illness, and he was like, I do
I
not want
did
to be
not remember
here.
that.
Yes, that is what happened. Trust me, I just listened to it. And he was like, Nope, I'm out of here, matey. Um, yeah, I just really liked that there was these sort of themes. And even with Loambud and Earthwhite,
Mm.
Loambud is grandmother, not mother,
Yeah.
but there is still sort of a parent-child relationship. Actually, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Earthwhite because he was an interesting Badger choice
Mm.
in terms of like personality and character. And like he
Yeah.
was very babyish for being a Badger who's probably in his 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting choice, all things considered.
Mm.
And I'm like, is that because he was raised apart from anything else? But also with Loambud and Ashton being like, be fearsome, fight, hurrah. But I just thought that was really interesting.
Um, this is not something I think Brian Jakes would have thought of. But this happens a lot in fantasy stuff, especially older things. They'll write a simple character,
Mhm.
so somebody who's not very, I hate to say intelligent, but like or wise in some way, shape, or form. They're naive, innocent, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it and stuff. A lot of mainstream fantasy, sci-fi, etc. authors don't always do a good job with that because they don't realize it, but a lot of time they're writing a neurodivergent character
Right.
and it's not something they would have really recognized or been aware of, honestly, in this case in the 90s
Right.
and
Right.
stuff, because it's like if they actually may have also, that's another thing that happens a lot in that kind of stuff is like they don't realize that they're neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form, and they end up writing that in the book, but never say that the character is. So in my head, with Earthstripe, he I feel like is neurodivergent in some way,
Earth
and I
White.
am not gonna Earthwhite, sorry. I am not going to try and diagnose that in any way, shape, or form and stuff because I don't know every bit of the spectrum of that. But he's not stupid. He is just very, I feel like, naive in a lot of ways. And he's not innocent per se because he knows what happened to his
Mhm.
family. He gets angry. We don't know what kind of has come up over the years. I know they've been isolated on an island for a long time, but it is what it is. But he
Mhm.
hasn't had a lot of experience with other people. He's only had experience with his grandmother and this other older woman, basically,
Mhm.
in this squirrel. And it's interesting because I've seen this happen sometimes in other stories where you get that kind of character who ends up being in charge of stuff and it
Mhm.
takes them a while to figure things out, but they end up being a lot of the time like the kind of like cookie cutter, not cookie cutter, that's a bad way to put it. They end up being touted as a very like kind ruler. That's
Mhm.
usually what happens. And I feel like that is the case with Earthwhite, at least from what I vaguely remember him being referenced sometimes in later books. Um, like Earthstripe was very like he's not like unkind, but like
Mhm.
he's just very like he was a warrior, like that was his whole focus. And his brother in his like has his own focus and everything like that.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, they never got to meet each other, and so we didn't ever get to see the contrast between them
Mhm.
side by side, but we get to see it very clearly on page. And I think Earth White is literally just like he's a neurodivergent character
Mhm.
that doesn't get a lot of explanation for some of the stuff that the way he behaves and everything because of the time that it was written.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. I just thought it was an interesting choice. Cool. Okay, Brandon, who is your favorite character?
I think Mara, in a lot of ways, seeing her, she's kind of like normal teenager of like, I hate you, Dad, and runs off and everything.
Mhm.
But it's nice that we get to see a young woman character in her like journey. It's almost like it is like a hero's journey.
Mhm.
Because like if you compare her and Samkin,
Mhm.
she has a more complex journey than Samkin does, in my opinion. Because literally, so Mara's whole thing, she starts at the mountain,
Mhm.
like brings this ferret with back with her when her and Pickle ran off and everything, and then they came back. Has it falling out with her dad, runs off, follows Klitsch, almost gets attacked by or gets taken by Farago, and then that sets off the whole like battle, etc. But then
Mhm.
her and Pickle have taken off and are off on their own. They're wandering for a while. They run into the Gaussum. They go on the journey to the stream or to the lake and like dealing with Earthwhite, and then they head back because they're like, oh, we gotta head back because we gotta save them. That's when she meets Samkin, etc., etc., and stuff. Samkin is at the Abbey, gets blamed for a moment for the death of a other character, as it soon found out that's not the case, but runs off with his best friend, Arula, and meets that vole, meets a hedgehog, runs into the Gaussum briefly, then is to the lake, then heads to battle. Like after they meet Mara and everything, heads to battle and everything. Samkin's journey is not as complex, and I don't feel like he gets the as much growth as Mara does in a lot of ways. Because yes, he was blamed for the death of Brother Hal, but like I don't know, just his whole journey wasn't as satisfying to me as Mara's was. Them together are important
Yeah.
because he's like, you're going to be our new badger mother. And he doesn't say that
Yeah.
right away, but like there's that like the way that Brian did it
Yeah.
was like kind of like a meet cute. And you're like,
Yeah.
if they were the same species, they would start being
Yeah.
together after this and stuff. It was very funny that he wrote it like a meet cute and everything. Or more like a kind of like a soulmates kind of a
Yeah.
bit is what it felt like. So Samkin just was like, ah, Badger Mom. We haven't literally the whole beginning of
Mm-hmm.
the book when you're at Redwall is them talking about at different points there isn't a Badger Mom. There should be. It's important to the Abbey, etc.
Yeah.
And then Mara fills that place eventually by the
Yeah.
end and everything. And so we get to see her journey of like, I don't want to do this thing that my father does because I can't like it's not I feel like it's too rigid and like I don't feel
Yeah.
like a part of everything, etc. And which is valid because the mountain, at least during this time, that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about in the next book
Yeah.
and stuff. During this time is literally just a military fortress at this point. And so she's like, no. And then she kind of like hears about Redwall and it's like, that sounds more up my speed. Like, it's about loving other people and like being community. And that's really important to her. And then she
Yeah.
finds that place in Redwall, which is great. So I really like Mara. The other characters that I really like are I'm doing a dual thing because they are together a lot.
Hmm.
Sergeant Sapwood and Ox.
Yeah.
I
Big
forgot the
Oxeye.
rest of his Big Oxeye, yeah. Who's I can't remember his title. He literally doesn't my one of my favorite parts is when him and Sapwood have been captured
Hmm.
and they get free. It's when they're like staked down near the tide
Hmm.
and they get free and Ox is like I can't swim or something like that and he's
Yep.
like trying to get Sapwood away and he like pulls rank on him and I can't
Hmm.
remember what rank is above sergeant because it's Sergeant Sapwood but
Yeah.
he's like I don't do it often but I'm gonna do it now and then he knocks Sapwood out
Yeah.
and
That was
sets
so
him out
good.
onto the ocean so I'm like oh my gosh so I really like Sapwood and Ox for different reasons like Sapwood is basically like it's this Earthstripe is his superior but he's
Yeah.
probably Earthstripe's closest friend
Yeah.
and push back some of the things. And I honestly feel like if Sapwood had been with Earth Stripe at the end, things probably wouldn't have gone the certain way that he did, because unfortunately Sapwood got kind of stuck off somewhere else, and
Yeah.
Oxeye was the only one that made it back. There was literally, I was so that was one of the few times I'm like, oh, they're gonna kill off Ox, because I was like, that happens sometimes. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't or what was it? Brian, sorry, specifically referencing Brian. Sometimes just he does kill off characters.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of
Absolutely.
character deaths. But this one I forgot because I haven't read this in a long time.
Hmm.
When Ox climbs through a window, I think is what
Yeah.
happens. I'm like, oh my God, he's alive. So
Yeah.
like that was one of those few moments in the book where I'm like, I forgot enough of this that I was surprised again. Because I'm sure I was surprised when I read this all those years ago as a kid and everything. So obviously it's like three characters, but like Oxeye and Sapwood very much are similar and different because they're two hairs from Salamandastron and they like do
Yeah.
a lot of the same things, but they both kind of had their parts to play and were really important to like keeping the mountain safe. So I don't know, I just really liked them and like hairs are like a lot of the time some of the best characters and stuff
Yeah.
in their own different ways.
So it's a lieutenant. He's a lieutenant.
Ah, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Lieutenant
Sorry.
Oxeye.
Yeah. Lieutenant Big Oxeye, but because he's just called Big Ox. Um, yeah, it's definitely one of those things that Brian does really well is writing final stands. And
Yeah.
Big Ox's moment here does sound so much like a final stand. Like when you have, like we talked about back in, I believe it was Marielle with the three hairs,
Yeah.
that was a final stand. And yes, Rosie survives because she's
Barely.
amazing. She's what?
Barely, I said.
Oh, barely. Yeah. She barely survives, but she does survive. And yeah, it was just cool that both Ox and Sapwood survive. So I totally agree. They were great characters. And then of course, because I believe Ox is the highest ranking officer.
But she doesn't act like at all the whole time. He is, I feel like, one of the highest ranking characters, but at no point does he do anything. It only references that he is as he's like, I need to get you out of here. Uh, I'm gonna pull rank kind of a thing right now. And they kind of do the hair joking thing that they always do and stuff.
And he also takes command after Earthstripe
Sapwood. Oh, yes. Yeah.
goes off to do something. So
Yeah.
it's one of the things that I thought was really good.
Yeah.
My favorite characters, classic Kaytlyn.
Very classic you.
Pickle, who is the hair companion of Mara. He's a young he's funny, he's quirky, he's dramatic. He's a great side character. He's a great companion to Mara. They have really good banter back and forth between the two of them, and I think it's really great.
Yeah.
Also I love that he, as a hare, can out eat everybody, and including Tubgut, who's a shrew
Yeah.
that he goes into an eating competition with. And it's literally, they do the whole like tortoise and hare
Hmm.
trope, but
Yeah.
where the hare, Pickle, is the tortoise in this trope, where he starts off
Yeah.
eating slowly and taking his time, and Tubgut starts off real fast and then loses steam. And I just thought it was a really funny, it was just dripping with irony, the whole
Yeah.
scene between him and Tubgut. I thought that was really good. Also, I just love
Absolutely.
a quirky hare, and
Oh, yeah.
Brian writes those really well.
He
Um,
does.
and then my other favorite was Arula, who is
Mm.
the mole maid who is companions to Sam Kim. And what I love is that she's just sort of, moles are often considered and seem to be reluctant members of the, like, the characters who leave the Abbey,
Yeah.
because they love their home, they love the ground
Mm.
that they walk on. They're not meant for anything other than the ground, essentially,
Mm.
is how they always like to identify themselves.
Yeah.
And what I love about Arula is she's such a rogue in
Oh,
terms
yeah.
of being a mole.
Yeah.
And specifically when they capture the rat, she just pretends to be absolutely insane, and like,
Yep.
not just insane, but bloodthirsty, and
Yeah.
is just playing up this whole, I'm a sadist who loves to torture creatures. And
It's like also in mole speech, she's going, "Brr, I'm gonna stab you," or whatever it is that,
Bri,
yeah, brr, there we go.
it
Uh, yeah.
is so funny. And even I love that she's using a paddle in the final battle to
Mm-hmm.
attack creatures. It's not even, she's not using swords or bow and arrow or anything like that. She's just
Nope.
got a big old paddle, and she's just like, I'm gonna whoop people with this big old paddle of mine.
Yep.
And it was just absolutely hilarious every single time. She's a great companion character to Sam Kim.
Yeah.
And this was the thing that I thought, again, looking at, there's a lot of duos, a lot of pairs in this.
Yeah.
Looking at Mara and Pickle, you had Mara, who is sort of this more serious, thoughtful, has a little bit more weight on her shoulders because of being who she is and who
Yeah.
her adopted dad is and all that. And then you have Pickle, who's sort of
Mm-hmm.
carefree, goes with the wind. I'm here, but deeply loyal. And he's
Yeah.
like, okay, Mara, wherever you go, I go.
Yeah.
We are friends. We are a duo. Wherever you go, I go. And then you have Sam Kim and Arula, who,
Yeah.
again, Sam Kim is a bit more serious, has a bit more of the weight of responsibility on him. Is the one carrying Martin's sword and has Destiny's paw on him, so to speak. And then you have Arula, who, again, lighthearted, go with the wind, but deeply loyal, and is like, okay, Sam Kim, you're leaving the Abbey. I'm coming with you, and I'm gonna go wherever you go, I go too. And I just think I really love that. And this was, I didn't talk about this necessarily because I saw a lot more parent-child stuff, but another big thing was the loyal friendships in this book were really, really clear. And it's not they're
Yeah.
not clear in previous, but there's just something in this one of Sam Kim and Arula were friends since they were orphan babies, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that friendship just grew stronger through the years. And it was like, of course, Sam Kim's off on an adventure, I'm going to. And then Pickle and Mara, same thing, both orphans and brought up in the mountain, brought up. And wherever you go, I'm going. And so
Yep.
you're right. Between Sam Kim and Mara, there was this sort of mute cute, like we're it was just I was listening to it and I'm like, okay, if
Church bell ringing in the background vibes.
seriously. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so but it's not the church bell, it's Joseph the Abbey bell.
It's the Abbey
You know what
Bell,
I
yeah.
mean? Because
Completely platonic story-wise. I no point was like, yes, they need to be together kind of a thing. It was just like the way that you wrote this.
but that was what I was
Sure.
trying to say, is that
Yeah.
it was so romance coded.
Yeah.
But I also was like, but I know that there's no romance. So it threw me off because I'm like, hang on a minute. The way
Yeah.
you're writing this and the way this your experience, it's literally like everything else fell away and it was quiet and you're staring into each other's eyes and there's just the like, I'm Mara, I'm Sam Kim.
Yeah.
Wow, it's like destiny, and then all of a sudden all the birds start singing and there's the beautiful violin in the background, and you're like, hold on
Yeah.
a minute. You're just friends. And you're always
Hmm.
going to be just friends. But so it was just it was really funny. I thought it
Yeah.
was really funny that particular part. But um yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of those two characters are my favorites.
Mhm.
Definitely. I did like Thrug and Dumble's storyline as well, and Rock
Yes.
Angus and the Hawks and the Eagles
Yep.
and all that. The big King
Yeah.
McPherson was great. I love that at the end Dumble's starting to speak all Northern
Yep.
because he was like, this is my friend. And
Yeah.
one of the other things I loved is the epilogue, the prologue and epilogue are both like Dumble's an old mouse who's telling the tale.
Yeah.
And at the end, there's a little mole who was listening to Dumble, and Arula's like, oh, he's a great big fibber. And then the mole's just like, but no, sorry, the baby mole is like, oh, he must be a great big fibber. And
Mhm.
Arula's like, oh, don't say that. Dumble, you know, he's your elder, be kind to your elder. And then the mole's like, you're right, grandmother. You were in it. So everything he said must be true.
Yeah.
Um, I just thought that was very cute. And
Yeah.
also I love when they're doing that when they've got the character much later who's
Mm.
telling the story of what
Yeah.
happened. And I think that was just really good.
It is.
Um, last thing,
Mm.
because I do realize we tend to talk a lot. Um, before we get to our nostalgia rating. This, I don't know what it was about this, but first of all, we didn't even mention Spriggett. Like, we didn't mention him by name. We
Who's
just,
forget?
the hedgehog that loves to eat
Oh,
wasps.
that helped them, yes. And had a tragic death.
It, I was so sad, okay? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I can't remember if he becomes a cellar hog or something like that. It's probably what happened.
Yeah.
I forgot. Very devastating emotionally for me.
Yeah.
Especially because he did the whole there's a battle and then oh he got wounded but he's lying down, he's gonna be okay. And it's the like, oh the joyful side character does that thing and they're like, wait, no, hold on. And then for Sam Kim, who already had to see Brother Hal's death,
Yeah.
and then to see Spriggett die as well, it was just really sad. And that like
Yeah.
really that really got me. And then also with Earthstripe's death at the end, I knew it was
Yeah.
coming.
Yep.
Like, I knew it was going to happen. Um, there's not two Badger Lords. You can't have two Badger Lords.
Nope.
Um, but especially with Mara's speech at the end
Mm.
of his over his dead body, just really, really got me. And I'm going to read her speech and then we can, yeah. Oh, okay. I'm already getting emotional. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Mara knelt and clasped the big battle-scarred paws of the fallen Badgerlord. Words tumbled out with her tears. I came back too late. Now it is past the time when I could tell you what is in my heart. I have ranged far and wide to be back home here with you, and in that time I have slowly understood what you tried to teach me. You who were ever true to your own code of honor and duty. To every beast, you are earth-striped the strong, lord of the mountain. So will your name be always remembered. You cannot hear me now, but I wish to add one more name to your title. The young badger maid took both the lifeless paws and placed them on her bowed head as she spoke a single word. Father. I was listening to that and I was just like, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm really glad none of my roommates are coming into my room right now because they'd be like, oh, Kaytlyn, are you okay? And I'd be
Yeah.
like, no, I'm emotionally wrecked. It was just really sweet. And Brian does that so well. So my nostalgia rating for this, as we're transitioning to that, is probably a 4 because I've
Mm.
always really liked Salamandastron. It is one I've read more frequently. It is pacing was really good, and so it kept me engaged. I had a lot of reading and being like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, this is what happened. Oh, that's right. And then
Yeah.
also just the nostalgia of the friendships and the power of friendship and how beautiful it is.
Mhm.
It really got to me. So I'm gonna give it a 4.
I think for me, this is a weird rating to give it, but it's like a 3.8 kind of a thing for me. I don't think it's quite 4 or above.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it as well as other ones and stuff, but I do remember it pretty well. There's like a lot of characters that I really liked, and I do agree with the pacing. It's like hitting all these points with a little bit of downtime and stuff, and this felt right for the type of book that it was. So I definitely I'm about a 4, but it's not quite, I feel like, on the same
Hmm.
level as like what you're saying for me. So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
rating.
Yeah. I love that. I love that we don't have to stick to the 3.5.
Yeah.
You know, we could do whatever we want because we're not doing stars. We're doing just numbers, I
Just
guess.
numbers.
Decimals. Who knows? Do you
Yeah.
have any other thoughts on Salamandastron by Brian Jakes, Brianna?
No, not there would be some that are tied to this in the next episode,
Yeah.
so stay tuned for that because there's some societal things specifically tied to Salamandastron that I would like to talk about, but unless I have the context of the next book, which is Outcast, I can't fully like go into it yet. So excited when we do get to that one and kind of my thoughts on it, which I shared a little bit with you.
Hmm.
Excited to share with our listeners and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's for next time though.
Fabulous. So thank
Yes.
you so much for listening to this episode of the Readers Clubhouse. If you like this discussion and you want to hear more, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify every other Friday when Kaytlyn gets them edited and put out. Check the episode description for our socials and join us in the clubhouse next time as we discuss, as Brianna said, Outcast of Redwall by
Mhm.
Brian Jakes, which is a prequel. And we'll talk about that
Yeah.
because we got some thoughts.
Yes, absolutely.
So we will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.